Hello and welcome back to the latest webinar series by Reuters Events, Upstream Oil and Gas Combats COVID-19 and the 2020 oil price crash. For those of you who didn't join us last time, my name is Jade Waters. I work as an analyst at Reuters Events, as well as being this year's project director for the Data-Driven Drilling and Production Conference taking place virtually now later this year in October. This is the second episode in the three-part series and is just one of several pieces of work we're doing to promote the industry and the key issues within it. Once again, thank you so much for the great response. We have over 850 of you signed up this time. And thank you, of course, to our panelists for your time and insight. Brief bit of housekeeping before we begin. The session is an hour long and is being recorded, so we will send you the full recordings within a week or so. So episode 2 today, we're looking at an industry which has been forced for the first time to work away from the office and away from the oil field. We'll be discussing whether this is a permanent change or just a temporary challenge, and whether there has been any acceleration of implementing digital technologies to enable remote operations, and whether this has been successful or if there have been any particular barriers along the way. Offering up their expertise and personal insight on the matter today is Leader of Digital Business Solutions at Equinor, Jarle Husebø, and Daniel Hunt, Upstream Advisor of Digital Innovation and Acceleration at Chevron. Once again, at the helm of the conversation, we have Jim Claunch, Senior Advisor of Digital Transformation at consultancy Bain & Co. If at any point you want to ask the panelists a question, you can simply enter this into the text box and we will try to address it in the Q&A at the end. So I think it's time to hand over to our chair. Jim, take it away.
Thank you very much, Jade, and welcome everyone. I thought what we'd do today to start this off, I'm extremely excited about this particular webinar. Jarle and I were colleagues for several years together at Equinor. I've known Daniel for several years. These guys have a deep understanding of working remotely, digitalization. So I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have, and that's what it's going to be. We're just going to have a conversation. For those of you that don't know me, I've spent about 35 years in the industry. I spent my first 20 years with Halliburton, and in the end ran what we call global shared services, which was all the things operations didn't like to do: accounting, IT, HR, all of that. They put it in something called shared services. Then I left and I went to Intercontinental Hotels Group as head of IT, they called it, and head of global shared services. You know, as a CFO, CIO of an oil field service company. Then I did a little bit of investment banking, and then I joined Statoil and spent about 10 years there. The last 3 or 4 years was focused on digital and data. And then I left because I realized that the challenges that Equinor faces are really industry challenges, and I wanted to be in a place to where I could really work with the overall industry, and Bain has been fantastic as far as that goes. Jarle, you want to talk about yourself a little bit?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. So my name is Jarle Husebø. I currently lead a group called Digital Business Solutions, located in Texas, in Austin, Texas. My background actually started in Norway. I'm a reservoir engineer. That's my trade. And my education, I worked offshore as a reservoir engineer for a while in Norway before moving over to technology development, where I led a couple of projects, technology development projects in both Asia, North America, and Europe, before relocating to the US to lead a subsurface group on technology development here. My transition to digital was more recent, back in 2017, and I've been working in the digital space since then, focused mostly on digital business solutions, which is not exclusively technology. It's also how do we actually drive process change, and how do we drive our operational changes using digital as an enabler. So I think, Daniel, I'll throw it over to you.
Thanks, Jarle. And Jim, thanks for the opportunity to participate in the panel. I think, as I think about the future of work, this is an area I'm pretty passionate about. But I think more importantly, it's going to be a key enabler for many of our business strategies as we move forward. So it's great to meet everyone virtually. I thought I might start with explaining what I do. Somewhat similar to Jarle, I'm in a small team that was put together by Chevron and our new chairman to create and drive an enterprise digital strategy. And at the heart of all of that was really to accelerate moving digital from the edge of the business to being more ingrained in the way we do things and achieve value. And, very important that this is about people and process. Technology is a big piece of this, but it's not really leading the discussion. And we'll cover that a little bit more as we talk about that today. Our goal is really to maximize the value of every piece of data, and in particular, the speed at which we can take data from information to insights, and then most importantly, insights to decisions that create value. So we've been, this team I'm on, we've been on this journey for a couple of years across our 43 businesses and functions. I, like Jarle, hadn't really come from a digital background, but I had worked in each of our 4 operating companies around the world in various assignments. My original background was petroleum engineering, but through Chevron, I've had the opportunity to work right across the value chain. So I'm looking forward to talking about some of these remote working, whether that's from home or from operations. Extremely important to Chevron. We see some really great opportunities in the area of connected worker, intelligent operations, and situational awareness. And as the discussion goes today, Jim, we'll get a little bit into that.
Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about back to work or back to the office versus work from home. And one of the great things about being at Bain is we see many different industries and how they are approaching back to the office, if you will. And one of the things that I'm certainly telling people is don't think of pre-COVID as something we're going to go back to, because I just don't see that happening. And I think from our industry, I think Jade said it in the beginning, we were forced into work from home. It's not something that we would have run to. And I think many companies or many people that I talk to have been actually surprised at how effectively and efficiently work continued. All the digital tools we'd invested in to collaborate actually work. I mean, even for oil and gas, they freaking work. And so it's been from my perspective something that has been great for the industry. And for me personally, selfishly, our office is downtown. And so when I go downtown to our office, it's 2 hours in the car in total. I now have a 10-second commute. I kind of like that. I kind of like the 10-second commute. It does create some things in my mind that where companies are going to need to be intentional about their culture. If there's a culture of camaraderie, a culture of team, that may be part of the why you go back to the office. And that's where I've been really challenging people is, know the why you're asking groups to go back to the office. Know why, because, right now with the virus not under control and no vaccine, people aren't necessarily crazy about going to the office, right? And so I think to some extent management would like to go to this pre-COVID days again and bring everybody back together and rally the troops. But, bringing them back together isn't necessarily going to rally them. So Now, as most companies have gotten through this original COVID shock, people are starting to think about back to the office. You know, what I think we're gonna hear Daniel and Jarle speak about today is, you know, it's time to accelerate through the recovery. If you are going to survive, if your company's going to survive, really leveraging digital technologies and investment in digital, you know, to build resilience into your operations, and not just your operations, but into your other functions as well. It is absolutely critical to do that now. And I've been encouraging, like I said, don't just think about going back to the way it was. Think about how you're going to reimagine how work gets done in the future, and be thinking about, as you're going through this process, if you lead a team, be thinking about what the future work of that team could look like, both from a work from home perspective, both from a what you've learned from digital perspective, data perspective. And as you're going back, start creating the new normal and be communicating with your team the new normal before you get back into the office. And the other thing that we've been really clear about with companies that are going back is, don't take a whole team back to the office, right? Take half the team, right? Split it. Because if something happens and the team gets sick, if the whole team is there, you absolutely have a continuity problem. And so that's been our advice, is split it. Have half the team there, half the team work from home. And that goes for executive teams as well. And then I think the last thing I would say is, one thing that's great about the oil and gas industry is the focus on safety, focus on people. And I think that's very, very critical as people go back to the office, and how oil and gas companies communicate all the things they're doing to protect people. You know, for example, are you providing masks? Are you taking people's temperature? Are you practicing social distancing? Are you closing small conference rooms? What are all the things that you're doing to protect the health of the people that will be going back to the office? And how you communicate that is a very positive message or negative message that employees are going to hear. Even how many people can ride on an elevator, right? I mean, that's an indication that leadership has thought through the many different things related to going back to the office. And you know, I'm very encouraged about, like I said, how the industry has learned. But I think what I'd like to do is throw it to you, Jarle, and you know, what's been the impact on COVID-19 on the way you work or Equinor works, and are you thinking this is a permanent thing or a temporary thing?
Well, I think from my side, it's probably going to be a combination. I would say the most obvious thing that went away immediately with working from home and shutting down offices and so on is, especially for companies like Equinor, who has a home base in Norway but a lot of global satellites, is travel dramatically went down or became non-existent, right? So it, to your point earlier, it kind of forced us into working in a different way and thinking in a different way. And I think from a technology perspective, one of the obvious one that we can talk about is everyone now had to be a one person calling in to a group meeting. Like my normal operating procedure before that was usually I'll be the one person in the US calling into a group meeting in Norway where everyone's sitting in a room. Very, very hard to interact with a large team when you have 20 in one room and one guy on the wall, right? So and I think actually getting everyone on the equal playing field has changed how these meetings are happening. They're more interactive. People are more following the rules of the technology available and working much more collaboratively than I would expect going into this. And I think a lot of those things has opened the eyes for our company and probably others as well. Is we've made an assumption before that there are so many types of meetings that would have to happen in person. Everyone would have to travel in for, say, workshops or larger meetings, and we're now dabbling into how do you run an interactive workshop in a digital space? How do you run these large collaborative meetings where everyone is essentially a video feed on the screen? And I'm quite impressed and surprised by how quickly people are adapting across the board. Even anyone who is much less comfortable with technology is actually picking these up due to necessity. And their willingness to adapt to new technologies has been quite impressive. So my expectation at the very least is across the board, our travel activity, I think, is going to be challenged and go down naturally, because we've learned that a lot of these things can be solved virtually. I think Daniel, you probably have some similar experiences and others as well.
I mean, Jim, you touched on this, and probably it's something to reinforce here that, you know, despite all these challenges that we're facing, our operations remain largely unaffected. I mean, the remarkable story is, as we went into the second quarter of this year, 3/4 of our workforce was working from home, and a quarter were working to keep that energy flowing into the system. And so things have changed, and the ones that are having to be in the plants and fields, platforms where we've got new requirements around health and safety to keep those people safe. But the use of collaborative environments, our use of cloud, augmented reality, and autonomous inspections has accelerated markedly. And I think what really has happened is that we're beginning to see this. We're testing our capabilities, we're testing our system, we're accelerating our capabilities in these areas. But probably the most important thing is that many paradigms have been broken. So this concept that, you know, you can't do your job if you're not in the office, or you know, how do we collaborate with people on the platform? Do we have to go to the field? A lot of these things are being tested right now. And you know, I've been definitely a big supporter of the author Alison Baum. She kind of wrote about Flip the Workplace, which was really essentially around how the workplace should be thought of as a place of collaboration, and other work can be done anywhere. Very much like how academia has kind of taken their approach to a lot of lectures are online, but you go to university to do the work and ask your questions and collaborate with other students. So I think there's, you know, as we move forward, we definitely don't want to forget the things that we've been learning and some of the huge opportunities that this has demonstrated. I think the challenge is going to be finding this right level of balance between remote working and face-to-face collaboration. Like you said in your kind of opening remarks, Jim, it could be very easy just to return to normal. I think many of the health challenges are going to kind of stop that from happening immediately. And I think really it's an opportunity for us to grasp and test the way we work going forward.
So guys, we have a question that's come in that I think is very relevant to what we've just been talking about. The question is, it is understandable for work activities that be done at home to have half the people work from home and half in the office after COVID-19. What about, for instance, those who work in process plants, right? So kind of be interested to get either one of your opinion on that particular question.
Yeah, I think I maybe start just on some of the health challenges that we face. I mean, well, health and travel challenges. I think we have a lot of rotational staff that, because of the travel restrictions, are no longer able to arrive at their places of work. And the other challenge has just been demanning non-essential personnel so that we're kind of minimizing risks. Across many of our operations, we have people who spend all their time there, either living in camps or in facilities. So the amount of new processes which are in place to kind of keep those people safe has increased. So I think it's really about minimizing contact. So, I think we're going to talk a little bit, hopefully, during this session about some of those technologies like connected worker and intelligent operations. Those types of things are really enabling and empowering our field workers to work in a different way that reduces the dependency on being inside an office and the dependency of being face-to-face with others.
Yeah, no, I second that. We see the same thing as, obviously hands-on tool isn't the kind of short list of things that will be done remotely, because that just requires people to be on location. But we still have field offices, we still have operations that are largely comprised of a combination between on-location essentials and and roles that are not as essential, and those are opportunities that we see where some of these roles can certainly be done remotely and still have the same support to the operations, but we're not in a position where replacing hands-on tool is a realistic option. Now, that being said, there are certainly elements where we can use technologies to limit and minimize how much people have to be on location, that being remote monitoring systems and other types of changes to how we work and providing technologies. But people are out in field also aren't in the risk profile connected to COVID, because they're typically lone workers or smaller groups that are spread out. So they have a very different safety profile that hasn't changed, which is our operational safety. So I think there's certainly cross sections here where you can still optimize to make sure you keep your people safe connected to COVID, but you'll still have your operations running as smoothly as possible.
So, Jarle, I know for certain, even before I left Equinor, you were leading and working Agile in support of the remote operating center. I'm curious, kind of what you've seen. Has working remotely changed your view on how integrated teams work together? I'd always been one that, kind of believed in co-location, and I'm curious how Agile has gone through COVID-19.
Well, it's an interesting question. I agree. It was also my perception when we started down the Agile path, where co-location of the team, same open space, having multidisciplinary teams working together to solve the full range of a problem. However, what we're seeing right now is it wasn't necessarily the co-location that was the key. It was the multidisciplinary integration of teams that really drove that efficiency. So having anyone from a production engineer to a data scientist and a data engineer and an analyst sitting in the same team working on the same problem, we've been able to translate that into a virtual space. Maybe that's because these teams were familiar with each other and they had already worked physically together at the time of working from home, but I still see opportunities where working in an Agile way is more about your process. It's more about how you work than it is about the where you work. And we've certainly seen our ability to move over to a lot of digital tools. Instead of having Agile boards on the wall, we use tools like Azure DevOps or other Agile tools that allows you to track progress across a team in a virtual space. So I think there's opportunity to continue working in that way, even if it doesn't, you're not able to work physically in the same space. And that's been an interesting transition, again, driving us to pick up a lot of new tools and ways of working within the same team that was working co-located before this.
Daniel, anything you would add to that, or shall I move on?
Yeah, what I would add to that one is that we've begun a bit of a journey of trying to work what we would call the teams of teams concept around how we deliver some of these digital solutions. And really it was about reorganizing ourselves from always having to do that delivery locally within the business. It's kind of a large resource base if you go with that model, which was kind of our previous one. So we kind of begun that journey pre-COVID. I think what's kind of happened here is we've been forced into running things like design thinking workshops and other PI planning events online. And I think Jarle picked up a good point earlier. People are beginning to learn some really great collaborative behaviors using those technologies. And so I think, the paradigms about the effectiveness of that has been broken. And I think that we do well at collaborating virtually. I think where the challenges lie are, in my opinion, social bonds are kind of very critical to how teams perform. So the discretionary effort and resilience that teams have seems to be a little bit close. When you've got some skin in the game, they're the ones that are going to go the extra mile to get kind of the work done. And we've had experiences where the local teams have felt that the remote teams weren't sharing the same accountability for delivery, right? So I think that's something that needs to be worked. The other piece is as we do begin to return some of our work back to the office, our physical and virtual environments haven't ever been designed together. So, as Jarle brought up a great example where, he's one man in a room of 20 people in an office. And I think we need to try to build those environments and thinking about them jointly, so that if you are working remotely, you're not hugely disadvantaged from the people who are there in the office. So just to be able to provide that flexibility and a similar experience.
No, I think that's a great point. We've seen that as well, is that there are multiple ways of solving that, where you kind of reduce the disadvantage of being the one calling into meetings that are more co-located and so on. And there's a lot of interesting technologies that can at least bridge that gap, but that's certainly a challenge. And to your point, also the ownership of delivery. Like I said, I think we took an advantage of the fact that these teams had been working collaboratively, co-located before going into a virtual space, but establishing a team that's combined with people that are connected physically to the location the service is being provided to, versus maybe using remote resources into the same team. That'll be really interesting to see how we handle that culturally, to make sure that people have a same level of personal accountability, and that they feel a responsibility to actually help the team deliver when things are challenging, or when there's particular deadlines that need to be delivered. So it'll be very interesting to see how these things move forward, and from that in that regards.
So we're getting a ton of questions. So what I'm gonna suggest on the next 2 or 3 questions is I'm gonna throw it to one of you, and just one of you get it, so that we can get as many of these answered as possible. Both of you guys, I know, have been involved in remote operations pre-COVID-19. Talk about the positive results that your businesses have seen from that, and then Jarle, I'll let Daniel answer that one, and then I'd like you to respond to how COVID-19 may have accelerated your ability to do that within Equinor.
Sure.
Yeah, Jim, so I kind of talked a little bit at the beginning. I think we see remote operations more from kind of 3 business capabilities, which we kind of call the connected worker, intelligent operations, and situational awareness. So connected work is all about freeing the field worker from the need to use the office. So think of technologies like LTE and Wi-Fi in the plant, handhelds, wearables, AR devices like HoloLens, things like that. Intelligent operations really about automation and advanced analytics of real-time data. So AI, ML, IIoT, digital twins, drones and robots. And situational awareness is really about how people, vehicles, materials, and equipment are kind of interacting with the environment in time and space. So you think there about technologies that provide the right information at the right time to people to enhance kind of productivity and the safety of our operations. So in those areas, we've been making great progress. I think, you know, I said in my opening, we've been trying to really work on taking digital from kind of IT projects into the business. And so I think, you know, as we began this journey, it was a little bit about gadgets and gizmos, like, oh, how can we use drones, or how can we use these handhelds? But what we've been able to do is really shift these business capabilities to be more aligned with kind of what the goals are. So, you know, in the area of situational awareness, we've been able to implement ways to monitor motor vehicles in our Kazakh operations in Tengiz. And this was a big area of safety issues in terms of injuries and potential fatalities. And so systems were put in these vehicles to help monitor them. Particularly fatigue was one of the initial use cases. But as that product line built out, it started to look at, you know, how are people overtaking and violating procedures, or are they taking unusual routes and things like that. And as these analytics and insights became more visible, and we were able to share them not only with teams that were kind of looking for safety improvement opportunities, but also with the drivers, the number of violations of overtaking, I mean, overnight they just drop, right? And then the number of thefts of fuel and things like that just disappeared. So in some ways, you know, you look at that and you think, well, maybe it's a little draconian. We're starting to track people and we're starting to do things. But I think as you make that very transparent to others, people start to realize that they're part of you know, a system to keep the place safe and make the environment a good place to work. So we've had great success there. And what's been built onto that now is we're able to scale technologies such as the Blackline G7, which we were using in Canada for lone worker. So essentially it's a wearable that's a safety beacon. So in Canada, they were having to go off to well sites, and typically they'd have to go in pairs. What we're able to do with these devices was, you know, bring it down to one person being able to go out to places. We took that technology and scaled it in Kazakhstan. And again, it was really around the use cases around safety and mustering. But you can see now, as particularly with COVID-19, the ability to track and trace and other bits and pieces that come about as a result of having that understanding of people and vehicles and the environment has been pretty powerful. And I think, you know, an example where all these things come together is what we call a integrated operations decision center. And a great example of that is where we've been running our drilling support center out of Houston, where we were looking after the entire Permian rig fleet, which at pre-COVID was a lot more rigs than it is right now. But the point there was we were able to have directional drillers working in performance pods. So, you know, across those 20 rigs, you might have had 4 directional drillers. In the past, we would have had to send each of them to the rig. Each one would have had their own idea about how to maximize the or optimize the well. What we're able to do now is drive much larger consistencies, better outcomes. And the DSC has been a key piece of how we've halved well costs and doubled EUR in the Permian. So really having large impact on business value.
Jarle, do you think COVID-19 has done anything to accelerate the path to even more of the stuff you like to talk about and get done with digital?
Absolutely. I mean, I have a number of examples. I think I'll take it one step back and talk more in principle on some of the things that's culturally we're seeing a change on. And if you look at oil and gas operations and digital technologies or data systems in general, you'll typically have Anything will fall into one out of three categories. You'll have your traditional operational technology systems, your SCADA systems, your so on. They're usually completely disconnected from any internet connection, and they're using your secure network. You have your on-premise services. So whatever system you've decided is going to run off your internal servers and so on. Then obviously you have more of the newer technologies that are leveraging cloud. We have been having a conversation with the business for a long time that at some point you need an integration between the three, and you need to do it with IT security in mind, and you need to do it in a safe and sustainable fashion. That hasn't been seen as a necessity from the business for most of this time, because when you're in an operating center or when you're in the office, they don't see the reason why these things need to be integrated, because they can technically access all of them. That completely shifted when everyone was working from home. Suddenly you couldn't access your OT system in any way, and suddenly your VPN connection was unstable, your access to on-premise systems was really limited, while your cloud systems were working quite stably. And we're seeing a massive pull from the business now to actually get that integration in place that we've been kind of trying to communicate to the operations, that is something they really need to think about. And I think culturally that's probably been what I say is the biggest enabler for acceleration in this shift. And I think that's I've had so many people in operations kind of give me a call and say, I can't access this doesn't work. And I'm trying to explain, it's like, do you remember the conversation we had 2 years ago or last year or 6 months ago where I was telling you that these things were gonna become an issue at some point? And they're now feeling that, so their motivation to actually get that resolved is very different than when they see kind of what's in it for them.
Yeah, and I know that tickles you. I know, you've had patients many times along the journey on this remote operations. So another question that's come in that actually I will address, we've got quite a few questions, so we're going to need to be pretty quick, guys. While I am able to continue building relationships with existing clients and partners, how do you see growing new relationships happening in the current COVID environment? And I must say, Michael, this is TBD in my mind. I think when travel opens back up, I do see, building relationships in the beginning being face-to-face again. I think there's just something about looking someone in the eye and building trust. But I do also see that there's work that we have won since COVID-19 started where we've never met any of the people on the other end. So it's going to be a mixture, and it is TBD. We're just going to have to see how this one plays out. I don't think there's a perfect answer to that. The next question is around remote video inspection. Are you guys, either one of you guys, familiar with that could take this question? Jarle, it says, what challenges have you seen by using remote video inspection? Is the technology mature?
Well, so first, is the technology mature? I think it's a somewhat. I wouldn't call it a full green check mark. Most of it has to do with solutions around intrinsically safe solutions and connectivity. That's kind of two. Now, that's not an inherent problem to the technology itself. It's just a problem to the applicability of the technology. We've done probably same as most other companies, as far as I know, is there's been pilots of the solution. It's usually focused around testing the technology itself. I think where we haven't done enough is how would you integrate that piece of technology into a work process? How would you actually set up proper ways of operating that technology? When is an appropriate time to use it? Who has the responsibility to actually make that decision, and so on? I think there's a lot of interesting potential in the technology. I think there's a couple of technical constraints that needs to be overcome, bandwidth being one of them. But it's quite interesting. We're not as mature as maybe a lot of other competitors in this space, but we've certainly dabbled, and we have a lot of a lot of use cases and different technologies that are being tested out across the organization in this space.
So Daniel, I want to ask you, what has been the value proposition of remote operations for Chevron? And it could be a particular business unit, whatever you're aware of. And then Jarle, I'm going to ask you to respond to how the heck did you compete for capital for your digital stuff?
So I think, on the value proposition for the business, it's particularly in operations, if you look at, how much of the data that we're receiving are we using for analytics? I think across Chevron, we got something like 1.5 million sensors out there. Our Gorgon plant in Australia is streaming about 2 million data points every second. There's just this huge wealth of information and data. And I think where we really see the value is around executing smarter, faster, and better. And, for us, it's really, we look across 6 levers. Does it improve returns? Does it reduce capital? Does it increase revenue? Cycle time? Does it improve reliability? Does it affect the cost structure or kind of reimagine the portfolio? So they're the sort of generally across the enterprise, they're the kind of 6 buckets that we look at. I think what, I would say in this one is we tend, I've mentioned this before, we try not to lead with technology. A great example would be if you're trying to cut your OPEX by 30%, that goal is so wide and broad, you could think of all kinds of things that could come along and help affect that. But once you start, moving down, if that's, well, we need to halve maintenance hours. Well, the very beginning is you've got to start with people, because maybe part of the reason those maintenance hours were so high was because reliability was being viewed as a driver that was higher than everything else. And maybe maybe accepting some small outages or plant upsets that aren't critical in terms of safety might be a better business outcome than, all those hours that you're spending on preventative maintenance. So once you've kind of gone through that and you start reimagining the process, because that too is important, you don't want to go digitize, not a very suitable process. So once you've been through all of those, you can kind of get down to what are those technologies that can really drive value. And I think at that point, that's where you really see digital demonstrating large amounts of value generation in very fast time. So, I think last year our data science program delivered about $400 million in value across those 6 levers. And much of that came in the area of advanced analytics in our operations. So, you can see, and just to pull that back to the 3 terms I was using earlier, that one would come under intelligent operation. They're the places where, we've been able to generate significant value. I think just one very, very quickly, one piece to remember is, Rio Tinto's journey to the autonomous mine. They really went down that path, with a goal to address safety. And I think one of the outcomes that they hadn't anticipated was that the predictability and consistency of their product improved. And so as a result of that, they actually got a premium on their iron ore because it became the market ore. So this value question, when we go into some of these transformational areas, is quite hard to always know exactly how is it going to impact our business. But I think if you focus, if you have understanding of how are you going to get to immediate tangible value, often these transformational ways of working unlock things that you might not even have imagined.
Jarle, given the big numbers, and I know Equinor's published some big numbers, I mean, how have you found it in terms of competing for capital for the digital things that you're leading?
Well, I think just as a broad sense, I think there was a period in oil and gas, at least in Equinor a couple of years ago, where if you tag digital on it, you would get funding because that was the new buzzword of the organization. That isn't obviously a sustainable long-term model. It's fine to kind of get people into the space, but Equinor has really, there are three distinct models where you can get funding for this type of project. One is more historical. So Equinor is a technology-driven company. We pride ourselves in having a lot of in-house built technologies. We have dedicated research and technology groups. At a corporate level, they actually have a protected budget that is specifically isolated for technology and development, right? So particularly around both research and development. So that is not an exclusive digital component, but it's a mechanism where you can actually get funding for these types of projects. In addition to that, in 2017, we also established a digital center of excellence that reports under our COO that looks across the landscape of digital projects in the company and establish what we call a strategic portfolio, meaning things that are replicable, scalable, things that can be reused over the organization, actually get some sort of organizational protection where that gets not directly funded by that organization, but it gets under their portfolio, and funding can come from multiple parts of the company. And then you have your regular traditional one, right? You go with a business case, you compete with every other project directly with the business, usually connected to some sort of business problem, and at that point you're being evaluated with hardware upgrades, infrastructure changes, and everything else, and on the same playing field. So it really does depend on your maturity of technology and how specific you are connected to a business problem.
So we've got a question from Elizabeth George that I'll answer this one. Usually a big office and view of a company logo has been key to branding. If working remotely is the new norm and need for corporate building may not be necessary, has there been a view on how this will change branding, reputation, sales, and marketing? And I think that's a great question. I would build it on external branding and internal culture, because it's both, right? And I don't think we know the impact of this yet, Elizabeth, in terms, I definitely would not want to be long on corporate real estate right now, though. I think as a general rule, we're not going to go back to where everybody goes to the office. For a little while, companies have long-term leases, so the external brand on the building is still going to be there. I think going forward, digital is going to play a huge role in the external branding, even for oil and gas. I just don't believe brick and mortar is going to be, and the big sign is going to be as prevalent in the future as it has been up to now. And then I do think companies that have a collaborative culture, for example, like being extremely inclusive, extremely collaborative, we're going to have to decide, is it one day a week people are in the office, or every other, in order to really be intentional about protecting a collaborative culture. And that's what I would say more than anything else is your actions need to be intentional about your external branding and how you want to protect your internal culture. Don't just let it happen.
Jim, I think it's worth pointing out as well, in most international locations, we tend not to brand our buildings, whether that be for safety or just, giving people who want to protest the opportunity to know where you are. I think most of our branding is more done in terms of our diversity and inclusion, the way we operate with the communities that we work in. I think only a small piece of it is our real estate.
So, Jarle, I'm going to ask this next one of you. It's from Paulo Prenzel. To which degree has the COVID-19 moment affected preventive maintenance activities? And Paulo, what I would say is Jarle will be answering this from a U.S. onshore perspective, I would assume, Jarle.
Yeah, no, that's correct. It's well, there are two ways of looking at it. The majority of what we've been doing in the maintenance and preventative maintenance side, one's very traditional, like we're trying to reduce cost, looking at our processes and prioritization and so on. But obviously, your your approach to maintenance has to shift when when oil is well, at some point it was crossing negative, but at least your oil price is half or lower than what you built a lot of these processes on. Things like do you shut in parts of your area because they're just not financially viable? Do you run to failure per certain area because you really want to maximize how much you get out before you have to do maintenance? And then but then you also have key components, right? If they're part of the key infrastructure, they're really important components that would have massive negative impact if failure. That's where we want to focus on deploying things like preventative maintenance through data science, through other solutions. So it really, as with most questions, it depends. It's somewhat complicated, but for us, we're taking a tiered approach, always keeping our safety at the top of our priority. But there are optimization decisions that can be made in terms of where you really want to make sure you have zero downtime, and where you can certainly be comfortable where it doesn't actually have a safety impact to have a lower regularity.
Daniel, I have a question for you that I know this is right in your sweet spot. What are the new skills and competencies for emerging, and any must be required from your perspective? And Jarle, I'll let you touch on that one too. I know that's in your sweet spot as well.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I think if anybody's kind of sitting there without thinking about leading edge skills that they need to complement the way in which they work now, they could find themselves in difficulty competing for jobs in the future. And so I think that really centers around some of the acceptance that this digital transformation is different. I know I'm a subsurface person by background, and I know a lot of people struggle with what's actually changed, you know, and it's kind of an area where we've used digital a lot. But I think working in the Permian was a big eye opener for me in terms of like onshore, in the sense that your ability to outperform others was really centered around how well could you use the data that you have, and could you use it in a way that was better and faster than the competition. And I think, you know, in other areas of the business now, they're beginning to see that, you know, running models that take 2 weeks to run, you know, or come back with an answer on is starting to be challenged. And so we're needing new ways of delivering information very, very quickly. And so we're beginning to look at other techniques. So I think, you know, in summary, some of the skills that we're really looking at are things like the citizen data scientist, you know, ability to use the Power Platform to visualize and see data in new ways. There's going to be roles from a operations point of view where we can replace, you know, sending a human out to go look at 4 things at a well site it's pretty low value work, and we'll probably be shifting to other methods to do those types of things. And so those roles and jobs are going to go. What will hopefully happen is that we'll spend more time working on, as I said, kind of in the opening on this, insights to decisions, right? Moving that way. And so people who've got a broad understanding of the value chain, that understand how a decision in asset development is impacting midstream, I think that's going to be an important skill. Being an expert in using Petrel and using that to maintain your career, those types of things are going to shift dramatically as we move forward.
Jarle, I'm not gonna let you answer that one. We got about 4 minutes left. Mike Olive has put in 2 really good questions. One would have taken a little bit long to answer, but the second one was, what are the potential cost, risk savings, and environmental impacts that are associated with mass remote working from your perspective, Jarle?
Well, I was going to say that's a big question too. Honestly, in terms of
2 minutes.
Yeah, well, the very, very short way of answering that is take onshore, for example. We have hundreds of locations and thousands of wells. We cannot monitor everything all the time, including for things that have a safety profile or an environmental profile. Now, digital remote monitoring and technologies allows us to actually have continuous monitoring of these things to have a faster response to incidents and also minimize the impact of anything that's occurring. And that's been one of our primary drivers when we talk about remote monitoring. It is just as much as about ensuring that we understand the safety profiles across our assets as it is about understanding who needs to go where for any type of operational efficiency targets. And I think that it just allows something that's impossible with staffing alone.
So guys, last question to each of you, give you about 60 seconds each. And I think this is a great question, and it is, we've all been through the downturns, and this one is particularly tough because we have COVID-19. We had the Russia-Saudi disagreement over production and oil prices, like you mentioned, being negative, and still now. I was excited the other day it hit 35. Every time we come out of these downturns, there's leaders and followers, and I believe that potentially the difference between the two is going to be even greater this time. Jarle, you first. What do you see the leaders will be doing differently than the followers as you start moving through the downturn more and more?
Well, the one thing I hope we don't do, and I think the winners and losers will be divided by this, is the same as we've done every downturn, which is we look within a silo or a department or a part of operations, and we try and squeeze more dollars out at the expense of suppliers or our own resources and staffing model. There's no massive easy wins there after X amount of downturns. That's not how we need to think about it. I think the real winners here are going to be the one that actually truly see data as an asset. They look across your value chain. They look at much higher level of integration across to make sure that you can streamline as much of your operations as possible and actually view your organization as an organization instead of a set of smaller organizations that individually need to be looking at their part of their piece of the pie, let's say. So I think that's going to be the differentiator in this round. The ones that actually view that as a much more holistic and much more integrated than we've done in the past.
I have to say I agree with you on that one. Daniel, final words?
Yeah, I just think, our industry faces challenges all the time. We got incredible people that we're lucky enough to work with, and each and every time we rise up to the challenge. I think at Chevron, a fantastic story was really how we responded to the oil crash in 2015, and we ended up being able to make the same amount of money from a barrel of oil in 2016 as we had in 2014. And I think we're ready to go again. This next step change is going to be harder. We kind of hammered those traditional levers, and we're going to probably need to look at new ways of working. I think thriving at $30 a barrel is going to require some disruptive ways of looking at workflows. I think the reality is that many people are just looking at how to survive at the moment, and they're predicting about $400 billion of spend cut from the energy industry this year. So there is going to be some impact because we're going to have to pace investments and prioritize differently, and that's going to impact our progress in some of these areas. But, at Chevron, we're ready to double down on digital transformation and see it as a key way for us to deliver business success.
Well, we're at the top of the hour just perfectly. Daniel, Jarle, you guys were great, just as I anticipated. Thank you very much. Jade, are you going to close us out?
I am indeed, yes. Sorry, that is all we have time for. Huge thanks once again to Jim, Daniel and Jarle for participating today, Really great to hear your insight on this topic. The full recording will be sent to your inboxes very shortly. As always, please share them with your colleagues, clients, the whole community. We want to spread the knowledge as much as possible. If we were unable to address your questions today, or you're keen to learn more on the topics discussed across the series, be sure to register for the Data-Driven Drilling and Production virtual conference on October 20th and 21st to hear more from our speakers and the rest of the community completely for free. If you head over to www.upstreamintel.com/data, you'll be able to learn all about the virtual event, as well as sign up for the final episode in the webinar series, this time with executives from Shell and Cimarex, who will be discussing what the future of the oil field will look like from 2020 and beyond. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone, and of course, stay safe. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.